Or Ein Sof carries in it the quality of the source, of the Ma'or, which mitziuso me'atzmuso. Therefore, the power, the koyach to create, yesh me'ayin. So Or itself would not be able to create yesh me'ayin because it carries this power to create. From the Ma'or, it can create too, as well. Today's Yud Tes Menachem Av, and as said before, I would like to dedicate the shiur Le'ilul Nishmas Imi Morasi Maras Sarah Bas Yecheskel Alea Shalom. I should have Neshama should have Aliyah, and the Karov Mama, she should come back Neshama Beguf, together with the rest of the entire nation that has to be reunited with us, B'geula Amitis V'Shlema. So we are in the same page still. Page, what page was it? Resh Yud, Resh Chaf, or Resh Yud, let me see, Resh Chaf. Basically what we are doing is we are learning what is Ein Sof. And in order to learn Ein Sof, as we said last time, many times you cannot, a subject can be so sublime that you can't talk directly, positively about the subject itself. You can only, meaning saying what it is. It's too high or too sublime or too deep to be defined by your words and by your definition what it is. But what you can do is do a lot of understanding what it is not. And by understanding a lot what it is not, you get to understand more what it is. This is called Yedias HaChiyuv and Yedias HaShlila. A positive kind of learning, and a learning and knowing in a manner of Shlila, negating what it is not. Negating what it is not, yes. Or rejecting what it is not. That helps you to know more what it is. It gets you closer to knowing what it is. And that's what we are doing. Ein Sof could be such a concept that there is no end to trying to explain what it is, and you never get there. But the way the Rebbe is approaching it is, let's first create those parameters, those boundaries, to know what it is not. That higher than this is something else, higher than Ein Sof. We're trying to understand what Ein Sof is, which is a big topic in Kabbalah and Hasidus. So, okay, so you're starting by creating the ceiling and the floor of it. In the order of relating to God, there is a whole Seder Ishtalshelus and many levels. So we want to define what is Ein Sof. To define in a positive way to tell you what it is too hard. So let's go take the easier way and first decide what it's not. At least in terms of the fact that there is a higher than Ein Sof and there is a lower than Ein Sof. The higher than Ein Sof, that will say what Ein Sof is not, from the higher end, is what? Can anybody tell me? What's higher than Ein Sof? Ein lo tchila. Ein Sof means no end. What's higher than no end? No beginning. Many things could be Ein Sof, could have no end to them. Like the Shemesh, there's no end to it, to its existence. It didn't decrease since Sheshes Yemei Bereshis. Same power, same sun, has a nitzchius to it, has eternity to it. Hashem instilled it. It's not nitzchius be'etzem. Hashem instilled nitzchius, eternity, in a nivra. But they are higher than that. They will see, as we see very clearly, like light. Light could be Ein Sof. We have Or Ein Sof, has no end, but has a beginning, the Ma'or, the luminary, right? So what's higher than Ein Sof? Something that Ein Lo Tchila, something that has no beginning. There cannot be higher than something that has no beginning. That's it. It is the highest. But Ein Sof is not the highest, because higher than Ein Sof is Ein Lo Tchila. And we established that Ein Lo Tchila, something that has no beginning, meaning nothing made it, nothing preceded it, it is no cause, has no cause, can only be a real something that is kadmon, that Ein Lo Tchila, which in many times is called kadmon in Kabbalah and Chassidut, primordial, is the one that mitziuso miatzmuso, the one that its existence is of its own. Nothing gave it its existence. Its existence comes from itself. And that's the only one that there is, that is God. His mitziuso miatzmuso, nothing caused him, nothing created him. Nothing preceded him, not in level, not in time, not in anything. We want to first define what Ein Sof is. Okay, we can say that there is all that has no end, there is Ein Sof, okay. What is Ein Sof? There is Machlokas, as we learn. The Mekubalim call Keser Ein Sof. The Ramak is asking like Miriam, and he says, wait a minute, Ein Sof you can call only God. Keser is already mechudash. Keser is already created, like all the other spheres. Very higher than all the other spheres, but mechudash. It's new. It's yesh me'ayin. Meaning, what does it mean, mechudash? Renewed, not renewed, enu. Mechudash means kadmo ha'he'eder, that it was preceded by non-existence. He'eder means absence. That it was preceded by being absent, by not being there. Ne'edar, nun, ayin, daled, reish means missing, absent. So anything that kadmo ha'he'eder, that was preceded by non-existence, is called mechudash. And the Ramak is going to disagree with the Mekubalim. The Mekubalim say that Keser is Ein Sof. How is it possible? So that's what we are learning. We are learning in order to understand all this, but now let's go back a step so we can get the context of our discussion. The context of our discussion is we want to know what Ein Sof means. And what is it exactly? So we have to define the term Ein Sof. In order to define the term Ein Sof, which is a very sublime subject, an expensive subject, the Rebbe is approaching it through Yedias HaShlila. As the Rambam says, you do a lot of Yedias HaShlila, you get more to Yedias HaChiyuv. So we are defining what it's not. So the exceeding of Ein Sof is the beginning of that which Ein Lo Tchila, has no beginning. So according to that, we will have a machlokes, what you can include in that or not. The Mekubalim will include Keser in the term Ein Sof, and the Ramak, Reb Moshe Korov Dovero, will exclude anything but God himself. It will exclude Keser as well, and include Keser in the Sfirot, and exclude Keser from the term Ein Sof, that according to the Ramak, it belongs to God only. Cannot share it with Keser. The Mekubalim say you can share the term Ein Sof with Keser. But there are still two, which creates a problem. because of which Hasidus doesn't follow the view of the early Mekubalim. Why? Because the Mekubalim say, well, you can include two in the term Ein Sof. Atzmus, God himself, and Keser, which is within Atzmus. Atzmus is, so to speak, Kol Yachol, Almighty, and therefore Keser and the Ratzon to Keser as a Ratzon, Keser as Ratzon, is included in Atzmus. So Kabbalah, the later Mekubalim and Chassidus don't like it because in Atzmus you have two, Atzmus is one. So we'll see how they included it. The early Mekubalim were not less smart and knowledgeable and intelligent than us. So that is the higher end of Ein Sof. That Ein Sof is preceded by Ein Lo Tchila. Ein Lo Tchila, the Mekubalim, so why didn't the early Mekubalim, why didn't they call Keser? Why didn't they call Keser Ein Lo Tchila? Because according to them, Keser is always there, was always there. According to them, Keser is Kadmon. That when Atzmus is there, Keser is there in Atzmus. So why don't the Mekubalim, the early Mekubalim, call Keser Ein Lo Tchila? They call it Ein Sof. Because they too understand that even though Keser is included in Atzmus, there's still two different things. There's Keser and there's Atzmus. And Atzmus is Ein Lo Tchila. You cannot say that Keser Ein Lo Tchila. Keser, you see, it's also called a name, a Shem. So you cannot, it's true that a person comes with his name, and everything has his name, but it doesn't mean that the name has the same Kadmus like the Baal Hashem, the person that is named, the owner of the name. So therefore, only the Baal Hashem, really Atzmus you can call Ein Lo Tchila, and Keser you can call Ein Sof. On the other hand, the view of the Mekubalim is helping us to understand what Chazal say. And who will resolve all this is the Arizal, that we will follow with the Chidush of the Alter Rebbe. So really, these different opinions are not like one dismisses the other. It's how Kabbalah builds up, is how it evolves, how the understanding of godliness evolves from generation to generation to generation. And the last big contribution in our discussion is, in this Maimar, is of course following by the explanations of the Rebbe Rashab and the Rebbeim before him, is the Chidush of the Alter Rebbe regarding the relationship between Or and Ma'or. That because Or is Me'ein HaMa'or, light, even though light has its limitation and light by itself cannot create. Why? Because the only one that can create, Yesh Me'ayin, is something that is Mitziuso Miatzmuso. That's something that has no beginning, is the only one that can create something that doesn't feel like it has a beginning. Yesh Me'ayin. And Or is never such. Or is always depending in the Ma'or. So Or for sure has a beginning. So how, but we know that Kabbalah teaches us that Or Ein Sof, as you asked, Or Ein Sof, that Or Ein Sof creates. So how is it possible that Or creates? Or is not Mitziuso Me'atzmuso. Or doesn't exist of itself. We said that only something that exists of itself and it is no cause can create Yesh Me'ayin, can create something that doesn't feel its cause. And Or is not such a Mitzius, such an entity. Or is is not Mitziuso Meatzmuso. Or is Mitziuso from the Maor. And Or knows it very well. And is constantly battled to the Maor, to its source, to the luminary. And therefore, Or by itself would not be able to create something Yesh Me'ayin. So how does it? Because, says the Rebbe, not because of the Or itself, because the fact that the Or is Me'ain the Maor, that the Or carries some qualities that are not belonging to it, to the Or, rather to the Maor. And the Or reflects those qualities. So the Or Ein Sof carries in it the quality of the source, of the Maor, which Mitziuso Meatzmuso. And therefore the power, the koyach to create, Yesh Me'ayin. So Or itself would not be able to create Yesh Me'ayin, but because it carries this power to create from the Maor, it can create too, or as well. So, but let's go back to the opinion of the first Mekubalim that say that from the beginning, whenever there was Atzmus, there is also Keser, there's always also Ratzon. We'll talk more about it. We are just beginning the conversation. And it will be a deep discussion, I hope, to learn it in the clearest way possible. And I will do a lot of Chazara until it's clear, and I see that Chazara is needed, including the repeated suggestion to choose each week someone to review. The definition of the early Mekubalim of Keser that was there to begin with, that they include Keser is in the term of Ein Sof, and therefore they say that Keser was there always together with Atzmus. That helps us, or makes it easier for us to understand the statement that Shelo Nivra Olam Hayahu Ushmo Levad. How the Medrash said that until the world, or before the world was created, there was only him and his name alone. And the name is Keser, Hashem and his name. So even in that case, we say that there are still two. So it's true that according to their view, Keser is Kadmon, like the Kadmus of Hashem himself. Keser is primordial, just as God himself is, so to speak. So it's always there. Nevertheless, Keser is not Atzmus Mamash, it's like a name. So Atzmus has a priority on Keser, not in time. Keser was always there with Atzmus. But in terms of the Makor being A, and the result that comes out of the Makor, out of the source, being B. So Atzmus is A, and Keser is B. And therefore, there are two things. In other words, from the view of Ishtalshelus and the coming to be of Keser, I'm just reviewing what we discussed so far. Keser is one with the Atzmus of Hashem. That's mitzad when is it here? When does it come to be? It was always there when Atzmus was there. On the other hand, from the end of the Mahus, from the aspect of the Mahus of what Keser is, it's secondary to the Ma'or, to the source. It's secondary to godliness itself, to God himself. And therefore, even the early Mekubalim didn't call Keser, even though they claim that Keser is Kadmon, didn't call Keser Ein Sof, Ein Lo Tchila, I'm sorry. They didn't call Keser Ein Lo Tchila, that it has no beginning, even though really it has no beginning in terms of time, or even whatever, even beyond physical time. It has no beginning because when godliness was there, Keser was there. When a person is there, his name is there. So in terms of that, they could call Keser Ein Lo Tchila, has no beginning. But we need to understand that has no beginning doesn't mean only in time. It means in terms of priority, in terms of A and B. Does A need B? Does B need A? So if A doesn't need B, A has a priority. And if B needs A, B has an inferiority comparing to A. And therefore B would be not just a letter B, would be secondary to A. And because of that, and this is the case in this case, that there is Atzmus, and then there is God's name, so to speak, according to Mekubalim, and that's Keser. But only Atzmus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu you can call El Lo Tchila, because this is A. Not only that it was always there, that A was always there. A is the source of everything. And therefore also the source of B. And Keser, even though it is Kadmon Kekadmuso, as Hasidus says, it is as primordial as God himself, so to speak. I like to say godliness. I'm afraid to say God. As godliness itself. Kadmon Kekadmuso is as early as godliness itself. Nevertheless, we cannot say about Keser that Ein Lo Tchila, that it has no beginning, because the name begins with Baal Hashem. The name begins with the owner of the name. Without the owner of the name, there wouldn't be the name by itself. And their Keser is only the name. And therefore, it's not called, even by the early Mekubalim, they don't call it Ein Lo Tchila. That's only Atzmus. Rather, they call Keser Ein Lo Sof, Ein Sof. Is that the higher end of Ein Sof is Ein Lo Tchila. What's the lower end of Ein Sof? Is Keser. The lower end of Ein Sof, the floor of Ein Sof, the ceiling is Ein Lo Tchila. What Ein Sof is, we are not defining. We are defining what it's not. So it's not Ein Lo Tchila. That's the ceiling of Ein Sof. And it's not Keser, according to some opinions, according to the Ramak for sure, according to the Keser could be the lowest, the lowest, the floor of Ein Sof can only include Keser. So in order to understand, we understood already the ceiling, the Ein Lo Tchila, we discussed it. Only God himself can be called Ein Lo Tchila. Only A can be called Hashem Echad, can be called Ein Lo Tchila. And now we are going into the lower boundary of Ein Sof, which is Keser. And in all this, for the purpose of explaining what is, getting closer to understanding what is Ein Sof. So we explored the top, Ein Lo Tchila. Now we are looking at the floor, the bottom of the definition of Ein Sof. We don't say what Ein Sof is, we are saying what is not. So the bottom of it is Keser. But in order to understand the bottom, now the Rebbe is going to a whole explanation of understanding what Keser is. And there are different views of Keser, as we just mentioned, as Kabbalah and Hasidus are progressing to understand what Keser is and what it's not. I mean, I did skip a longer discussion about the definition of what we began, but some of you were, or some of you were not, what Kadmon is. We see that there are different levels of Kadmon. That there is Kadmon in time, what came first, what came later. And then there is Kadmon in Maila, in levels, like we said that if there is a concept that the world was created, Yesh Me'ayin, that necessitates to believe that the creator has to be present in the creation all the time. The creative power has to be invested in the creation all the time. So in this case, idea number 2 comes out of idea number 1. but not in time. They come together, but still idea number one is the A, is the source from where idea number two come. And so too, we say there are different levels. I don't want to now go deeper than that, but there are different levels of Kadmon, like the shadow of the person, we said. That wherever there is light, wherever there is a person, there is a shadow. There's no, shadow is Kadmon as the person. It didn't come after, came together. Still, without shadow cannot exist without a person. Person doesn't need the shadow. Shadow needs a person. So there is Kadmon, but you cannot call it Enot Chila. And there is another Kadmon that he brings here, which is like a flintstone. It's called, it's an Even Ash, it's a firestone, it's a flintstone. Nevertheless, the fire is not the stone. But they come together. Like 2 plus 2 is 4, comes together with the 4 plus 4 is 8. They come together, but you cannot call the second one, 4 plus 4 is 8, Enot Chila. The Chila is 2 plus 2, is 4. See that there are Kadmon in level and not necessarily in time or in sequence. Now this aspect, that the B is as early or comes together with A than as A, that is the view of the Mekubalim of Keser. Okay, I just, want to, that's how they view Keser. The Keser is not equal, doesn't equal Atzmus, but it comes together. That in Atzmus itself, there is a Ratzon. And according to their view, there is no stage where there is Atzmus without Ratzon. Not that Ratzon was created or even emanated from Atzmus, rather that Ratzon is Kadmon Kekadmuso. That is as early as Atzmus is. Okay, I think there's more to say, but I think it's enough in terms of this. But let's now talk about the therefore of all this. So, the Shita of the early Mekubalim. The problem of this Shita is that in Atzmus there are other things. The Ramak the Arizal has a problem with this, and Chassidus has a problem with this, because according to this, Atzmus is almost like Murkav, is almost like compound of different parts, so to speak. And it's not Pashut. And therefore, the Chassidus will follow the Shita of the Ramak, that Keser is not Kadmon, and it is supporting more the view that you cannot say that there are any aspects in Atzmus but Atzmus itself. On the other hand, according to this first Shita of the early Mekubalim, there are two advantages to this Shita. One is to explain what Chazal say, that Ad shelo nivra olam hayahu shmo bilvad. What does it mean? That until the world was created, there was only Hashem and His name. So the early Mekubalim solve it like this. Who Shmo? Who is who? Him. That's Atzmuso shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Hashem Himself. Ushmo, His name, Keser. That is existing together with Atzmus. And therefore, before anything else was created, before the world was created, there was only Hu Ushmo Bilvad. There was only Him, Atzmus, and Keser. So that helps us to understand that that's Chazal. Also, another advantage of this Shita, that it helps us to understand the term Ein Sof and not Enot Chila that relates to Keser. And it helps us to understand the term Ein Sof also according to other Shittos. So the Mekubalim Arishonim did distinguish between Ein Lo Tchila and Ein Sof, and they only called Keser Ein Sof, and they only called Atzmus Ein Lo Tchila. And that helps us to understand the other Shittos as well. Okay, summarizing so far, and next shiur, Bezrat Hashem, will go straight into the Shita of the Ramak, that claims that Keser is not higher than the 10 Sfiros, because according to the early Mekubalim, Keser, since Keser is part of Atzmus, you don't count it with the Sfiros. Keser is not part of the 10 Sfiros. The 10 Sfiros, according to them, start in Chokhmah, begin in Chokhmah. And Keser is part of Ein Sof. The Ramak will claim no, the Keser is Mechudash, and it is part of the 10 Sfirot, and he will explain how. And the Arizal will resolve it between the two. Now let's summarize. According to the Shita of the Mekubalim, the earlier Mekubalim, Keser is Kadmon kekadmuso shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Keser is as Kadmon, as primordial, as early as the existence of God. Like a flintstone, that the fire is not created from the stone, they come together. But as long as there is a stone, there is fire in a flintstone. And so too Keser. Kadmon, like HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's as early as HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu exists, it exists. Okay, so as long as Atzmus HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there, Keser is there. And this is the biur in the words of the Medrash, Ad shelo nivra olam haya hu shmo bilvad. Shmo is Keser, which is as Kadmon is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nevertheless, it's called Ein Sof, and not Ein Lo Tchila, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the main one. He is the Baal Hashem, the owner of the name, and the name is Keser. That's so far the view of the early Mekubalim. In Yirtzeh Hashem, we will move on to explain the Ramak next time, and you will see the difference between the view of the Moshe Cordover or the Ramak and the earlier Mekubalim. And then we'll get to the Arizal, and then we'll get to the addition of the Alter Rebbe.